The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People is not about habits. The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People is about architecture. Most people buy the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People to fix their week, which is exactly why the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People can actually scare them. It asks a much colder question, really. Who designed the person using the calendar? Stephen R. Covey was not handing you a planner. Stephen R. Covey was handing you a load test, not for your schedule, but for your center. We're going to explore this book today as an explainer of structural integrity. You see, this book stays alive by refusing to flatter your motion. It makes your motion answer to a wall. It asks whether your effort actually has an address, and whether your speed is truly serving a vow. Look closely at this reality right here. You keep building the room you say traps you. You know exactly what this feels like. You answer the message, you clear that small task, you say yes with a very clean professional voice, and the night comes, and literally nothing moved. I want to tell you right now with absolute certainty, this is not because you're weak. Your exhaustion is not some kind of character flaw. It's just biology doing its old, highly efficient work. You are simply defaulting to the path of least biological resistance, and we really need to understand how that mechanism operates. The reason this happens is actually pretty simple. The nervous system loves near rewards. It saves energy by obeying what's loud, what's visible, what's right there in front of you. It completely trusts bright signals, and it genuinely fears social cost. Because of this hardwiring, the urgent thing feels incredibly real to your brain, while the important principle-driven thing, well, that feels totally abstract. And the abstract thing always loses because it lacks a physical shape in your day. A principle needs a place. A promise has to have a trigger. A boundary requires a sentence. It can't just float around as an idea. Let's look at a false belief that sounds incredibly mature, right? Once I get clear, I'll become consistent. Let's trace this idea to its ultimate, absolute end, and you just collide with reality. Directionless habit becomes busy loyalty to the nearest demand. That's the real trap. Your inbox doesn't need to beat your core values in some philosophical debate. It literally only needs to arrive first. Your body then calls the first signal truth. This is exactly how a week gets stolen. Not by some grand villain, but by open loops with excellent manners. I wish this weren't true, but look at where it leads. Watch how this subtle shift happens over time. It always starts when you tell yourself, hey, I'm not lost, I'm just in a really demanding season. Which, sounds fair. But a boundaryless season of busyness slowly morphs into a climate, and a climate eventually solidifies into an identity. Then you start saying things like, I work best under pressure, but what you actually mean is much darker. Pressure has become the only authority you still obey. Your circle of concern keeps expanding to take on everyone else's emergencies, while your circle of influence just keeps shrinking. You end up confusing awareness with actual agency. Sure, you know more about what's going wrong, but you're leading less of your own life. This brings us to the core anchor of this entire framework. A load-bearing wall does not motivate the house. Just let that sink in for a second. A wall doesn't inspire the roof. A wall makes certain freedoms possible. That is the absolute secret in this book. Covey's concept of private victory is not modern self-care language. It's a structural law. A foundation rarely looks heroic on a random Tuesday afternoon. It only looks essential when the storm actually hits. Doing the deep work before the praise can find it feels pretty boring, but it's that exact structural integrity that makes true freedom possible. Consider the duality of this structure. On the left, think of the architect's steel beam, carrying a massive load long before anyone ever praises the aesthetics of the room. Now look at the right, the musician's string, holding immense tension before anyone hears a single beautiful note. It's the exact same state. You are likely trying to play a song without accepted tension. You want resonance without tuning. You want the space without the support. Now, a slack string is comfortable, for sure, but it is biologically impossible for it to sing. A missing wall leaves the space feeling open, but it can't hold any weight. This isn't a call to rigidity. It is a call to chosen, deliberate tension. Without that chosen tension, your values are likely failing you. If a principle lacks physical protection on your calendar, it's purely decorative. It's just wall art. The calendar is your only true receipt. Building your first habits requires stripping away these false sovereignties. Mood loses the vote. Urgency loses the vote. Approval loses the vote. Only a chosen principle gets to govern. That's exactly why Covey's idea to begin with the end in mind is actually quite severe. The end isn't a motivational poster. It's a strict judge that decides which good, urgent things still cannot enter your day. Without that load-bearing private center, public interaction becomes a brutal dilemma. On side A, you've got harmony by self-erasure. You agree, you adapt, you soften, and you keep the peace entirely at the cost of yourself. On side B, you have truth with no empathy. You declare your standards loudly, and you call the resulting bruise honesty. Both sides feel morally armed, and both will absolutely ruin trust. Without a private center, every relationship just becomes a referendum. If they approve, you exist. If they push back, you fracture. That isn't collaboration, right? That is an identity rented by the hour.
So how do we solve this? Covey cuts right between them with structural boundaries. Interpersonal habits like win-win or seek first to understand aren't just corporate niceties. They aren't weaknesses. They are strict disciplines for keeping your center while meeting the other person. The emotional bank account he talks about isn't sentimental at all. It is structural credit. Trust lets truth travel farther and lets repair land sooner. This is the adult form of effectiveness. It requires a deeply maintained inner structure so that you can hold the wall and open the door at the exact same time.
I want to pause here for a serious provocation. Think about your day-to-day life. Some of your chaos is socially rewarded. People praise your responsiveness, right? They praise your incredible flexibility at work. But consider this. They may actually be praising the leak in your structure. A team can easily get addicted to your lack of boundaries. A family can depend on your self-abandonment. A market will absolutely pay for your depletion. Your highly praised work ethic might actually be a socially rewarded addiction to abandoning your own center. The way out requires circling back to the beginning. Back to the room that currently traps you. That room was not proof of failure, it was just proof of repeated design. And honestly, that is incredibly good news. The quote here says it all. A room built by habit can be altered by habit. The exact same biological mechanism that built the wrong room is the very one that can build a new one. One wall moves when one rule changes. Design can be changed, not by sheer rage, but by one governed, deliberate act. That deliberate act begins with a harsh reality check. Don't start with some grand fantasy. Start with your constraints. You have to firmly ground yourself in reality by stating these hard limits first. Fixed work hours, family obligations, your actual health limits, your financial debt, your sleep debt. You absolutely must name the energy you truly have. We do this because true expansion and honest design can only happen inside actual physical bounds. Freedom built on the denial of your constraints is always going to punish you later. This requires a totally new decision toolkit. On the left, we have strategic delay tools, like a private constitution audit. You use checklists and ask what principle makes the choice obvious, well before the pressure even arrives. Now look at the right column, real-time tools, like overriding a pattern in the moment. I must deliver this with absolute weight. This requires deep domain expertise, expert only. Without a deliberate practice environment and years of history, do not rely on real-time intuition. Pause, delay, and rely on your structure.
Tonight, don't try to redesign your entire life. Choose one wall. Choose one principle that deserves protection and one appointment that proves it. At upgowise.com, you can access your growth map, not as a product, but as a practice. Return to this book when the wrong wall starts looking impressive again. Remember, the calendar is not the center. The center writes the calendar. Direction is a habit, too. Name the constraint you invented. Drop it.